Hi, it's Karen Musson here, and today I've got a clip for you about a horse that was really uptight that we changed the feel so that we essentially settled him from the inside out. So that'll be interesting. This clip comes from a series of clinics that I'm doing with Home of Joy Farms here in Ohio, owned by Robin Cronin and her husband Doug. And so this is, I just put a picture up here. So here is Becky and Bentley. This is, so you can see if you've ridden a horse like this, that he's really uptight. You know, he's in this beautiful arena on his own, and he's really aware of any sounds, and it just so happens, of course, that there are sounds. Somebody's banging a pipe, maybe doing some repairs or something in the background, and there's various things that are a little alarming, and he's got that feeling like he's going to sort of jump out of his skin any minute. And so Becky's had made a lot of progress with him on her own. This was the first time that we had met that day, and so she's more than able to relax him somewhat through some exercise, loosen him up, that kind of thing. And so he does settle down, but in the end you really get this sense that he's kind of holding something. You know, he's holding, guarding his heart, watching out that there's something about to get him. It's just what I call that hum. It never quite hum in his engine, never quite completely goes mellow, right? And so that's what we were looking for, is how could we invite Bentley to get more mellow. So I'm showing Becky here a different way to offer feel through her reins. Is the only thing we really changed that day, and it was an extension of something that we had done that morning that Becky had been practicing and experimenting with. And so this exercise actually is a combination of two things. I learned this eons and eons and eons ago when I was growing up in France, and it was an exercise to essentially to gain independence of your hands, right? So just to become independent of your seat and so forth. And I added to that a feel that I learned from Leslie Desmond, that it's very, very light but also very supportive. And what you're going to see here in Bentley is actually quite typical of the response that you get. And so what changes is that you're able to offer what I call an inside to inside feel down the reins. And that may sound strange, but it's a very different thing from what we normally tend to do under those circumstances, which is to sort of put walls up with the reins and contain that horse. So I'm just showing Becky here what exactly to do with her reins, and you can see how Bentley, even with me from the ground, can feel the difference in that rein. He starts to lick and chew almost immediately. And this just goes to show how much these horses that seem like they're not so accessible actually have the door just waiting to be open. They want to feel better. They want to follow a better opening. And so that's all I did in the rein there, was offer something that felt good to him and felt like a better place than he was in his mind in that moment. So he followed it even then, right? So that was just a little demonstration, and then Becky rides around here and starts trying this out for the first time. We normally do this with both reins at the same time, and actually with some larger motions with the reins up and down and to the side and so forth, but super slow. So every time I say that, somebody tries it for the first time, it's about at least 2 times too fast, right? So if you want to try this, you want to go micro slow. You'll have a feel on there that comes through you and is not this feeling like you need to contain the horse, right? And so as she does this, you'll see what happens. In a very short time, Bentley starts to respond. He starts to let down a little bit, and actually this is only about 2 minutes later. He starts to yawn in the middle of his stride.
Good. And then let's just stop for a minute. Good.
and because I can see that he wants to yawn. And so when you see that happening, it's best that you just stop, so that what that is indicative of is the horse is actually really letting go of something they've been holding on to usually, and in this case certainly. And so you want to stop so that they have every opportunity to let that roll right out of them. And so she stops, and sure enough, you can see here he starts to yawn. And then he yawns some more, and then he yawns some more, and then he yawns some more. And so so just even from that first attempt, and you know, it wasn't perfect, and as you'll hear me say often, it doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be good enough to communicate the right intention and the right feeling tone. And if it feels good to the horse, they will follow that opening. And so this is exactly what he did, because actually, as much as he seemed like, you know, it was really difficult to relax him, the thing that was on top of his list was, how do I relax? And then we offered something up that felt good, and so he immediately followed that. And so you can see here at the end, I always love to see this in a horse. It never gets old to see this look on their face, where instead of you know, these looks where it feels like maybe they'd kind of like to go back to the barn, or maybe they're looking for a treat or something like that. This look is just to live for, which is where he's going, well, that felt pretty good, and he starts to engage. And he starts to check in with the two people in the room, so to speak, even though there's actually some pipe banging going on through this little bit of the clip here. And his ear goes, you can see his ear go, but that's it. He doesn't tighten back up. In fact, he checks in, and he has this look on his face of that wonderful, wow, what now, right? He's interested, he's engaged, we have his mind, and he's actually very mellow. And Becky was commenting that she could feel it right through his body. He just, everything, he just started breathing differently. It's just 2 minutes in. And what I also want to point out in this clip that's super important is that notice how that we stopped to sort of hold space for him to release that residual stuff, and number two is key, integrate the new experience that he just had. Okay, and so a key point here is that he's actually integrating this and absorbing all this in the context of the rider still being there, saddle still being there, bridle still being there, and I'm still there too, right? And he checks in a number of times with me, a number of times with Becky, and so forth. And that's really important, because he's doing that essentially, he's training himself, but it goes deeper, right? It goes as deep as it can. And sometimes you need to kind of unstack this, take the rider off maybe, in order for him to be able to go there with all that yawning and so forth. Sometimes you have to do that. In this case, we didn't. And so it's sort of an extra bonus, and kind of opening up the bandwidth on how much he's learning relative to, right in the context of the rider being there and supporting him. And so that's what Becky did a fantastic job there. I'm sure you'll agree. So there you go. That's what happens when we change from an outside to outside feel of sort of boxing the horse in, as it were, with the reins and so on, to an inside to inside feel that has a very different feeling tone, and actually interacts with the jaw ultimately, and the root of the neck, and from inside, right? And so that in itself starts to release the jaw, starts to release the root of the neck, starts to release the entire horse from the inside out. And really nice result. And so congratulations to Becky, and look forward to next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.